The Summit Within. Major H.P.S. Ahluwalia was a member of the first successful Indian expedition to Mount Everest in 1965. How did he feel when he stood on the highest point in the world? Let us hear his story in his words. Climbing the summit and then the more difficult task of climbing the summit within. Major H.P.S. Ahluwalia was a member of the first successful Indian expedition to Mount Everest in 1965, and in this lesson, he has talked about his experience of climbing the world's highest summit. And he tells the readers how the physical conquest changes one on a personal and spiritual level. So we'll move on to the first paragraph. Of all the emotions which surged through me as I stood on the summit of Everest looking over miles of panorama below us, the dominant one I think was humility. The physical in me seemed to say, "Thank God, it's all over." However, instead of being jubilant, there was a tinge of sadness. Was it because I had already done the ultimate in climbing and there would be nothing higher to climb and all roads hereafter would lead down? So, here in this passage, the author begins by telling the readers about the rush of multiple emotions he felt as he stood on the highest point of Mount Everest. The huge panorama below them made them feel little and modest. So, climbing up to the top had made him so tired that his physical strength was glad it was over. However, rather than feeling proud and joyous of having climbed the highest peak, he could feel some sadness within him. The only probable reason for this feeling could be that he had now become proficient by climbing the highest point, and all the roads from that point will only lead downwards. By climbing the summit of Everest, you are overwhelmed by a deep sense of joy and thankfulness. It is a joy which lasts a lifetime. The experience changes you completely. The man who has been to the mountains is never the same again. So he was saying that once you have made to the top of the Everest, you were touched immensely by the feeling of joy and gratitude. These feelings are so intense that they stay with you throughout your life. And he also says that it is an experience that holds the power to transform you entirely. And in fact, a person who has been to the mountains never returns as the same person again. As I look back at life after climbing Everest, I cannot help remarking about the other summit, the summit of mind, no less formidable and no easier to climb. Even when getting down from the summit, once the physical exhaustion had gone, I began asking myself the question why I had climbed Everest. Why did the act of reaching the summit have such a hold on my imagination? It was already a thing of the past, something done yesterday. With every passing day, it would become more remote. And then what would remain? Would my memories fade slowly away? So, here we can see when he reflected on his life after climbing Mount Everest, he couldn't stop thinking of another big summit. Here, another big summit implies one's mind, which wouldn't be much easier to climb. No one can give a complete answer to what one guesses or what one forecasts when it comes to our mind. So the narrator mentioned that, like climbing Everest, it was not easier to climb on one's mind or thoughts. Climbing the summit within was more challenging as well as it was not easier to climb. Next paragraph. All these thoughts led me to question myself as to why people climb mountains. It is not easy to answer the question. The simplest answer would be, as others have said, because it is there. It presents great difficulties. Man takes delight in overcoming obstacles. The obstacles in climbing a mountain are physical. A climb to a mountain summit means endurance, persistence, and willpower. The demonstration of these physical qualities is no doubt exhilarating, as it was for me also. While contemplating the difficulties or problems encountered while climbing mountains, here the narrator's mind led him to question why people climb mountains. For him, it wasn't easy to answer, and people may come up with answers such as the basic responses given by other climbers should be because it is there. So the statement implies that climbing mountain presented great difficulties and the climbers took delight in overcoming obstacles. Whenever these difficulties occur, they would face them with tolerance, willpower, and firm decision because the climber's main intention was to reach the destination. So next paragraph, I have a more personal answer to the question. From my childhood, I have been attracted by mountains. I had been miserable, lost when away from mountains in the plains. Mountains are nature at its best. Their beauty and majesty pose a great challenge, and like many, I believe that mountains are a means of communion with God. In contrast to the responses of others, the narrator indicated that he had a more personal answer for the question of why he had climbed the mountains. The narrator shared his interest in rock climbing with his readers. He said he had a deep love for mountains since he was a child. He used to feel lonely and sad in the plains when he was away from the mountains. Also, their magnificence and beauty posed a significant barrier. The narrator, like many others, believed that the mountains provided a platform for directly communicating with God. Once having granted this, the question remains why Everest? Because it is the highest, the mightiest, and was defied many previous attempts. It takes the last ounce of one's energy. It is a brutal struggle with rock and ice. Once taken up, it cannot be given up halfway, even when one's life is at stake. The passage back is as difficult as the passage onwards. And then, when the summit is climbed, there is the exhilaration, the joy of having done something, the sense of a battle fought and won. There is a feeling of victory and of happiness. Later, the narrator went on to say that even after answering why people climb mountains, the question of why Everest remains unanswered. It indicated that there were many mountains suitable for climbing, and his mind questioned why he had selected Everest in particular. The narrator had his reason behind climbing the world's highest mountain. He said that Everest was the world's highest peak and the most powerful mountain. Many people had tried and failed to climb over it because it was the most difficult to climb. People needed every bit of power to reach the summit of Everest. It indicated while climbing Everest, the climbers undergo numerous hurdles. Also, the narrator stated while climbing Everest, the climb would take one's energy completely.